Welcome to an amazing evening of House of SpeakEasy's literary cabaret, seriously entertaining. We're your co-hosts. I'm Lucas Whitman, and this, of course, is Amanda Foreman. We've got an amazing show for you tonight. We are, in addition to being an amazing performance here, we also are a literary nonprofit devoted to connecting communities through books and reading. And so Amanda's going to tell us a little bit about what we do.
Oh, well, thank you, Lucas. So yes, welcome everybody to our super scary, super exciting October show. Yes, be very afraid, but also be very happy, because what does SpeakEasy do? This year we have delivered over 20,000 books in our bookmobile to neighborhoods, to book deserts. I know, thank you very much. Thank you. We've held over 40 of our Speak Together workshop programs, and this year we have become partners with the New York Public Library, and we will be taking over their branches all around the 5 boroughs and doing their literary workshops on their behalf. So thank you, New York Public Library. We're very excited about that. Now, back to Lucas.
The theme of the show tonight is Be Not Afraid. The rules of the evening are 4 different speakers are each going to give you a meditation around that theme. Some of it's going to be true, some of it might not be true. Our first speaker tonight is the incredible Jeremy Dauber, who is a professor of Jewish literature and American studies up at Columbia University, and the author of a number of books, including Jewish Comedy, The Words of Shalom Aleichem, both finalists for the National Jewish Book Award, and American Comics: A History, and most recently, American Scary: A History of Horror, from Salem to Stephen King and beyond. You can see why we invited him here tonight. Please welcome Jeremy Dauber to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I guess we should talk about being scared tonight. And we should talk about fear. And I wanted to talk about, first, the pure stuff of fear. And that's childhood fear, right? Being afraid as a kid. And you know, I now have this new book, American Scary. And as interviewers are coming up to me and they're saying, Jeremy Dauber, you're an acclaimed cultural historian whose book the LA Times called casually magisterial. I don't know why they open like that, but they do. It's very weird. What made you want to write this? And, you know, and I talk about Stephen King and about how I read it as a child, you know, and all that. But that's not the real story. The real story I want to tell you tonight, the real truth of how I got into this horror, the real story, the primal trauma. Now, I'm going to warn you, as I tell this story, that it may not actually be true. But it feels true, and I think it's mostly true, and I think that's the important point here. It's how I remember what happened anyway. So it was a long time ago. It was back in a mystical, enchanted land we called the early 1980s. And I was a kid, and we went over to some adult's house. I don't remember whose house it was. I don't remember it all. But I do remember one thing, and this we knew coming in, which was they had HBO. Okay, that was what they had. HBO. It was extremely exciting because we at that point did not have HBO. And I had been told by friends of mine who had HBO that if you were lucky, and if the timing was right, and if you were able to, you might be able to see a lady in a bikini. This was very exciting to young Jeremy, and I wait until the adults are talking about something very boring in the living room. I think it was probably about real estate or something like that. I don't know exactly. And I snuck down the hall. Now, one of the things, I am an academic, and when I teach, one of the things that I talk about is that some horror fiction is conservative by its nature. And what that means is that there is a crime, and then that crime is horribly and terribly punished. You will see the relevance of this in a moment. I will go down that living room, to that hall, out the living room, and I go into the TV room. And this is in suburban New Jersey, and I go in, and there is a television, and it has, for those of you who are younger than me, you may remember this, it has one of those boxes on the top of it. That means, in fact, they have cable, and they have HBO. And I turn on the television, and lo and behold, the television comes on. I turn it to channel 14, which was HBO in New Jersey, and there is a lady in a bikini. This was amazing. I mean, I didn't know that that was what it meant, like on-demand television, right? I mean, it was incredible. And there's this lady in a bikini. She is in a hot tub. This is fantastic. Someone knows where I'm going with this. A hot tub, and this is great. And all of a sudden, I'm watching this, I'm enjoying this, and a hand reaches into the frame and turns up the temperature of the hot tub hotter and hotter, and then a man in a mask comes into frame and strangles this bikini woman to death. And I'm like, what the hell just happened here? Right, and of course this is the thing, right, that I can't tell anybody because I knew that I was not supposed to be watching HBO. Right? I knew that if I told my parents what had happened, they would be like, well, you know, that's what you get for watching HBO. Now, of course, I should say now I'm a little further down the road, and I have children myself, and if they came to me, that was exactly what I would not say, right? I wouldn't do that. I would say, you know, it would be comforting and all that, and it wouldn't be such a big deal. But when you are 8 or 9 years old, you know, forget it. That is it. So I'm being honest with you, good personal friends right here. This was this thing that I carried around with me for many, many years until tonight's exorcism. So for years, as a result, and this became inexplicable to my parents, I could read horror, but I would not watch anything because I would say it must be too scary. I would not watch the George Hamilton Dracula parody Love at First Bite because I was sure, and it drove my parents to distraction, but of course I would never tell them why, and they are not here tonight. So I guess that I undertook in some ways this book as a kind of catharsis, as a kind of therapy, but you know, there's an easy path to this for you if you have some kind of similar experience, and everybody who I've talked to about this has some sort of, we had this sort of primal experience as a counter, so I'm going to give you kind of an easy 3-step process to dealing with this in your own life, okay? So, you know, I don't know if you came here for advice, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. First, and this is a very important step, get a university to hire you, okay? Very important. Get a university to hire you and tenure you and let you teach what you want. Second, teach a class, decide it could be a book, get Evan Hansen Bundy in the back to edit it. He's very good. And then third, and this is the part that you can really do at home, watch 700 horror movies in a row in chronological order. Yeah, that's scary, right? Yeah. So the thing is, and I'm going to tell you, the thing is that I know that the boiling frog metaphor, right, is actually just a metaphor. It's not true, right? That if you put the frog in hot water and you sort of turn up the temperature, like what happened to poor nurse Karen Bailey in this movie, you know, it actually will jump out. But that's not what happens sort of as you watch these movies. You get more and more sort of inured to this. But when I talk to my graduate students about their dissertations, I tell them that there is such a thing as the magic bullet theory. And the magic bullet theory suggests that there is always something waiting out there to get you. Right? Now, in the case of someone writing their doctoral dissertation, it is an article that is almost precisely on the same topic as you that you have not yet found. And until you have found it, you have not yet done your work. That's the magic bullet theory as applied to PhD dissertations. As applied to primal traumas being worked out by watching 700 horror movies in chronological order, it is that scene. That scene I remembered that was waiting out there for me. That scene of the hot tub and the bikini and the man in the mask. And I knew it was coming, and I knew when I saw it that I was going to stroke out. Fast forward to somewhere around movie 475, right? And I'm watching, and it's Halloween 2 from 1981. And I'm watching the movie. Michael Myers is on the loose. He's in a hospital. And some kind of some kind of memory is beginning to tickle the back of my head. And then I see the hydrotherapy room. And I'm like, oh, this is it. It's coming. And Michael Myers steps into frame, and he strangles the woman in the bikini. And my reaction was, because I had watched 474 horror movies before that, and it was really pretty much fine. And so what was surprising was that felt extraordinarily powerful. That felt extremely not afraid, right? Not to say that there weren't other movies that I saw that scared me. They certainly did. It wasn't to say that in the process of writing this book, I'd learned that a lot of what scares you as you grow changes. It wasn't that I also had learned, of course, that over time, in America, what scares all of us, even if the fears at heart are basically the same, of walking down those hallways towards a fate you don't exactly know, but you know is coming, right? Those might stay primally similar, even if the details all change. It may also be that each one of us finds our own particular horrors that are more or less affecting to us, right? Right now, if you had asked 8-year-old Jeremy what scared him, he would have said vampires and that guy, right? Right now, vampires are okay. I'm fine with vampires, right? It's other things that are more scary, about harm to my family, harm to those I love. Those are the things that keep me up at night. But what it seems the most to me is that ultimately what I was able to do in writing this book, and if you choose to read it, hopefully what you do in reading this book, right, is by encountering these fears, by taking them for a walk, for talking about them and listening to them in these fictional contexts, in these conversational contexts, in these theatrical contexts, you exercise some nature of control over them. It's not an original insight, it goes back to Aristotle, but I think it's a powerful one. And I think it's one, really, that allows an explanation for why it is that so many of us are drawn to something which, on its surface, is really something that should drive us screaming away. And I'll leave you with this. It doesn't really matter in what way you choose to encounter those fears, in what way you choose to think about them, to explore them. The haunted house of horror and of fear has many different rooms. And whichever one works for you is great. And all I ask is that when you walk into that room, you take a look around, and the door swings slowly shut behind you, and you feel a small, whispery voice say something to your ear. Turn around and say, you know what? I saw you in, and you're basically a bad puppet with a sort of strange special effect. It's not such a big deal. Thank you all very much. Have a good night. Thank you.
Now you're all primed for Halloween watching there. Thank you, Jeremy Dauber. Woo. Next up, we have Jive Poetic. Jive Poetic is a writer, an organizer, a DJ, and an educator. That's quite a lineup. Based in Brooklyn. He's the founder of the Insurgent Poet Society and the Carnival Slam, and is the co-founder of the Brooklyn Poetry Slam as well. And he's the author of the new memoir entitled Skip Tracer, about which Jason Reynolds, who's a friend of SpeakEasy and a wonderful writer himself, wrote that Jive and Skip Tracer is an anthropologist of his own skin and blood and history. He has delivered to us bone and word, rice and rhythm. He has given us gold. Please welcome this gold to the stage. Jive Poetic, please.
All right. Let me just get this out of the way here. How's everybody doing? We're doing fine. Thank you for asking, Jive. All right, so my name is Jive Poetic, and that's the whole intro. All right, there you go. Rolling ocean crashed between her toes. Sand built the coastline. She tight-roped yesterday to her back, with the Panamanian sun set in the most black of her mouth, full of clumsy English, Rickety on her Spanish tongue, shuffling Caribbean accent marks inconspicuously. She blended in Jamaica, where Cuba gave her the sun. She spoke clumsy, too, in Canada. West Indian camouflaged her, Panama invisible, mistress of the skies. Toggling West Indian syntax, translucent at the border. My grandmothers were dream catchers. Hopscotching countries, jumping identity double Dutch, watching greener shades of brown grass darken every time she landed behind the language barrier. She clutched yesterday's tongue under today's image, exercising her phonetics to flip acrobatic English easy for her. Foreign tongue was Spanish in Jamaica, Jamaican in Canada, Canadian in New York, reaching for citizenship, red taped out of range with immigration on her heels until her last breath evaporated above Los Angeles, as black as planned. Her maple leaf colored children sifted, accent free, obscured behind Panama. Jamaica was blindfolded, monolingual. My tongue now rolls as rickety as her English did 3 countries before. One cold shoulder ago, Latin America recognized me no more than Jamaica did. Called me American boy. Under breath, over unbroken speech patterns, lost in translation, I felt invisible, while visibly in neither command of enough Spanish nor patois to correct the secrets hiding her inside me, undetectable even in death. She lives around the border of my eye, while I, tongues away from the language, learn to speak in the New York of my tongue, 2 generations away. And I kid you not, listen, I'm in the dark of this dance hall. Multiple Spanish reggae tones mocking the star-spangled portion of my red, black, and green footwork falling off of every drum beat chuckled at me, this collage of a woman. Tildes between her locks and patois flowing from Latin roots when she smiled. She smiled me still. When she spoke me speechless and somehow made me homesick for a place I had never been. Thank you. Woo! All right. Give it up for grandmas. All right. Love them nanas. Okay. All right. I bet you that's not how you expected that poem to end, huh? All right, grandma's in here. All right. So listen, I started thinking about that poem maybe around the early 2000s, and it's just been in my body for a long time. And I was trying to figure out how to talk about my family, how to talk about legacy and lineage and all of these things. I didn't know where to start. And then there was this picture that just kept popping up in my head. And it was of my two of my great-grandmothers. And as I told people about this picture, these 2 great-grandmothers, I realized I had so many friends who didn't have pictures of 2 great-grandmothers in the same picture at the same time. And so it really made me think about just this picture itself, right? And then what it means to my family. And I thought about the first time I saw this picture, and I remember I walked into my grandmother's room, right? And she was in there, and she was watching General Hospital, because, oh, some of you guys know what I'm talking about. She was watching General Hospital because she loves soap operas, man. Do not talk when her stories is on, because she does not play that. All right, so she's watching General Hospital. I think it was like, I think Frisco Jones was getting married to Felicia or something like that. Oh, I'm not making this up. This is real. Okay, he had the song, All I Need. I remember, the 80s was a complicated time. We didn't have cable, okay, forget about it, all right. So she was watching this, and also at the same time, she had on her bed all of these pictures, right? It was like more pictures than I have ever seen in my life, right? And she was sorting them out, and she was explaining to me who was who. And then there was this picture of my 2 great-grandmothers, right? And then there was this other picture of this man, and he had on like this tan suit, and the collar was open, and then it was like really hanging over. It was like prime, like 1970 something, you know what I mean? And I couldn't figure out who it was, and she wouldn't tell me. She didn't know, she didn't want to talk about it, but she changed the subject, right? And I'm like, well, man, who is this person in this picture? And I read it, and it said, mi prima Betty, right? And I know Betty was my grandfather's sister. That's my Aunt Betty. She appears a lot throughout most of my work. Aunt Betty shows up somewhere. She's in my new book, Skip Tracer. She's in there. She's in stories I tell all the time, right? So I was like, okay, well, who is this mysterious man that my grandmother has a picture of, and it's dressed to my Aunt Betty, right? So I have to figure this out. So what I was doing is I just thought about it. I asked questions. I asked family members, and no one wanted to talk about it. And it just stayed with me for most of my life, right? And then when I started writing poetry, I started deciding to book myself in cities that had national archives where I can research, right? Because it's expensive to fly, man, I'm telling you. But If you can get booked, then boom, National Archives. I worked it out. All right. So I go from place to place and I research and I go to National Archives all over the world. And I can't find anything on this guy. I'm like looking at his name and I think it says Panama on it. So I'm looking at his name in Panama and I can't find it. And what I end up doing is going to DC. And I'm just now using their free Wi-Fi at this point because I'm frustrated. I can't find anything. And I say, well, let's just check out social media and see what they're talking about. And I find a post by this man in Panama. And he says, I'm here with my grandfather. And the names match. So I'm like, okay. This is it, family unity or something. I don't know. And so I send him a message, and boom, he blocks me. He doesn't even respond. He doesn't even get back to me. He probably thought I was a scammer or something. I don't know. But I said, okay, well, listen, all right, I think I might be onto something. So then I followed him to Instagram, and I realized after saying this out loud, it sounds like cyber stalking. So I'm mildly concerned. And if anybody's a therapist, you can talk to me, or I can talk to you, and we can work that out. All right. But I went to Instagram and I saw a picture of what looked like the same man, but he was much older. And he was having a conversation with someone else, another Instagram user. And I said, okay, whoever these people are, they love this man in this picture so much that they'll respond. All I have to do is go vague and public. Man, the more I say this out loud, it does seem internet stalkery, man. If you want to be an internet stalker, I could teach a workshop on it. I don't know how to monetize it, but we'll figure it out. All right. So what I did was I clicked like on one of the pictures and then just put in the caption, I know who this man is. Ooh, the plot thickens, right? And I said, okay, well, cool. Let me just sit and see what this does. And just like I thought, they were in my inbox immediately. Who are you? How do you know who this man is? And they were talking back and forth to me. And I explained that I think he fits into some research I've been doing. And I'm not sure how he's related to the story, but I'm certain that he is. And we talked for the entire day. Like literally like 24 hours, I'm on Instagram messengers talking back and forth to these people. And I said, well, listen, do you think you can recognize this man if I sent you a picture of him younger? And I sent it to her. And she said, yes, this is my grandfather. And I was like, wow, okay, so tell me about him. She explains the story. It turns out her grandfather and my grandfather were first cousins. And I had been trying to find my family in Jamaica for so long. It turned out most of them had gone to work on the Panama Canal and didn't go back. And so I found this man in this picture, and I wrote to them, and I eventually went down and visited them, and I met them. And I was really thinking about, like, why wasn't this story given to me? And I realized my grandparents were immigrants in this country, and they were terrified. They were not going to talk about immigration. They were not going to talk about where they're from. Because, think about it. My grandfather would have been around the time, the missile crisis, and he's not going to share this information. So my mother, and then my youth was around Panama invasion. They're not going to share this information. But I was able to reunite the family through this process, and then I ultimately wrote a poem about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this poem because it's been on my heart since I was watching Frisco Jones with my grandmother, all right? And I'm going to do this for you. And after all of this, I was able to compile it into a book. So here we go. The Photo Album. A museum we search for lives fallen out of touch on the gallery floor. An exhibit we trace against folklore. We think we know something about Jamaica, so we think we know something about this tableau. Pressed between the plastic and the context it falls from, it self-identifies Panama, and it is inscribed to Aunt Betty. Age paints over everything she's ever seen. She now sees for the first time. Every time she sees it again, the signature claims itself her cousin. I take its word for it. She takes mine but forgets. In Brazil, a woman loses her grandfather. She doesn't know that we found him because we are too far in the future. I researched the image in social media rabbit holes over the years and distance. We find again the man we could not place at a wedding with his granddaughter. I reach out through a picture. She sees me and reaches back. Hey, thank you very much, everybody. Peace.
Thank you, Jive Poetic. That was amazing. Great energy. Now that moment in the evening when we test out how literate and literary all of you in the audience are. The name of the game is Tip of My Tongue. You're going to get 3 passages read out loud to you. There are answer sheets on the table, and you're going to fill out the name of the author and the name of the work. And it could be a poem, novel, play, anything that's been written by someone. All right? No Google, no Perplexity, no Claude. Just your brain. Any questions? The winner goes away with this wonderful book, a bag of signed books by all of our authors here tonight. Any questions, concerns? Okay, you ready? All right. Our quizmaster tonight is someone who's very special in our hearts here at SpeakEasy. Denise Forbes has been part of SpeakEasy since we started. She is an amazing educator and teacher. In 2020, she received the State University Counselor of the Year Award, and she's a school counselor specializing in college placement and advisement, and she has been such an amazing mentor to so many students, including many of the ones that we've worked with at SpeakEasy. So we're thrilled to welcome her up on stage now to give you the quiz. All right? Please welcome Denise Forbes to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, guys, I'm not going to perform, but I'm just going to give you your quizzes and hope you have a fun time. Not singing. Guys, no Google. This is so easy. I just looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, I know them. So here we go. Quote 1. Need my glasses. You have plenty of courage, I am sure, answered Oz. All you need is confidence in yourself. There is no living thing that is afraid when it faces danger. The true courage is in facing danger when you're afraid. And that kind of courage you have in plenty. Right. All right. Ready for quote 2? I think you guys are ready. Okay. Quote 2. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose, singing freedom. Freedom, where are you? Because I need freedom too. I break chains all by myself. Won't let my freedom rot in hell. Hey, I'ma keep running, because a winner don't quit on themselves. All right. See people write in. Love it. Guys, we only have 1 bag of books. So if you all win, sorry, just 1. But the books are on sale outside. All right. Quote 3. The gods do this in shame of cowardice. Caesar should be a beast without a heart. If he should stay at home today for fare, no, Caesar shall not. Danger knows full well that Caesar is more dangerous than he. Where 2 lions littered in one day, and I, the elder, and more terrible, and Caesar shall go forth. Thank you, guys. Good luck.
We're going to have a brief intermission while you all ponder the quiz, all right? Thank you.
I was just about to name and shame everyone who was still talking. Huh. Oh, I missed out on one of my fun games. But never mind, because now we have the second half. And as that guy said in Groundhog Day, it is a doozy. Because, oh yeah, it is a doozy. Because our next speaker, I'll have you know, she was here last month. And she, I don't know, out of whim, she filled out Tip of My Tongue. She was the only person who got it completely right. So yes, so our next speaker is the winner of last month's Tip of My Tongue. She's also a professional writer. I'm just saying that. It's not like we haven't just hauled her off from the street. But it does speak to one of the things I admire most about Gina Chung, which is that she has this expansive mind that when you read her writing, it is as if you discovered a door in the wall, and you open that door, and you walk into an undiscovered country. And it's such a pleasure to have her here this evening. I have to read how many prizes she's won, but she's the recipient of the Pushcart Prize and a 2021-22 Center for Fiction Susan Campbell Emerging Writer Fellow. So she's a bright young star. And she's the author of the novel Sea Change, which was longlisted for the Center for Fiction's first novel prize, as well as a 2023 Barnes & Noble Discover Pick, and an APLA Adult Fiction Honor Book. I mean, it just goes on and on. She was a New York Times Most Anticipated Book, and her short story collection, Green Frog, was a Good Morning America Book Buzz pick. So when I think of her, I think of the future of this country, the future of the writers of this country, and just how bright that future is. And this is Gina in her own words. All kinds of things inspire me, but particularly family lore, folk and fairy tales, weird animal facts, random gossip, and stories of resilience or regrowth in the face of loss. I'm always looking to surprise both the reader and myself on the page. Ladies and gentlemen, Gina Chung.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Can you all hear me okay? Oh, amazing. What an affirming crowd. Well, happy spooky season to all who celebrate, which I'm assuming is most people in this room. So on the topic of fear and being scared recreationally, if you were like me as a kid, you loved to be scared. And I don't mean being scared of, the typical things like a test at school or bullies or eating your veggies. Although, true story, I was actually very terrified of the smell of celery and carrots for a very long time as a child because I was not good at eating my greens. Anyway, I digress. I'm talking about the more fun kind of scare, the kind of full body chills and thrills scared where you're like, I'm too scared to even go to the bathroom alone at night. I'm scared to look out a window or into a mirror because I'm afraid I'm going to see something that I'm not supposed to see, something supernatural that belongs to the night. So when I was a kid, I loved that feeling and I chased after it, and it's followed me up until this day as an adult. And for those of you who get it, you know what it feels like. And for those of you who are like, I have no idea what she's talking about, I'm so sorry, but bear with me. I compare that feeling of wanting to chase the scares to kind of being addicted to eating really spicy food. So if you are in that camp as well, you know what it's like. It's absolutely delicious. You feel all these kinds of thrills. It's a full body experience. Even though you're going to be paying for it later that night in the bathroom, probably alone when everyone else is asleep and you are in pain and you're like, why did I do this? It still feels worth it because it's so thrilling. It's kind of addictive in a weird way. So my theory around this, and there's a lot of people who are much smarter than I am who've talked about this at length, is that I think the reason we like to be scared recreationally, for those of us who, again, fit into this camp, is that it's no coincidence to me that a lot of the things that we're most afraid of are actually stand-ins for the bigger, cosmic, less fun, universal fears that come for us all. Things like death, loss, mortality, aging. These are all things that are going to happen to all of us in this room and to the people we love, and there's no way around it. And so I think that's the reason why, you know, whether it's Halloween or any other time of year, we really like to be scared in the form of like killer clowns or aliens or ghosts or haunted dolls, because it's a way of allowing ourselves to feel what it's like to actually be scared without actually having to confront those other way less fun things. So to illustrate what I mean, I'm going to take you back to my childhood. And so by a show of hands, who in this room had something in their house or grew up with something, whether it was like a book or a movie or an image somewhere, that you were like absolutely terrified of, but you couldn't stop like taking peeks at it? So show of hands. Yeah. Okay. That's a fair number of you. Yeah. Okay. So for me, well, the thing that I was the most scared of was the Goosebumps series. So 90s kids, shout out, anyone? Goosebumps? Yes, I see you. So the Goosebumps paperbacks, if you'll remember, their covers are very iconic. They're actually very scary, too. So I inherited a stack of these Goosebumps paperbacks from an older family friend, and really, I was way too young. I had no business having these books in my possession, and I was too scared to actually read them, but I loved looking at those gross covers. But I would only reserve it for special times. I would kind of thrust it into the back of my bookshelf so that I couldn't even come across the covers accidentally. But then sometimes in the middle of the night, I would creep over to my shelf, pull out one of those books and stare at it for as long as I could, whether it was into the eyes of like a demented marionette or a vampire or a goopy mummy, whatever it was. I would force myself to stare at it for, I don't know how long, minutes probably, until I had enough and I like couldn't take it anymore, and I would thrust it back onto the shelf, run back to bed, and throw the covers over my head. I don't know what it says about me that I did this all the time, but I'm reassured by the number of hands I saw earlier that, you know, there were some of you out there who did something similar, maybe. So this might be why the thing I'm going to talk to you about now also came from a book, not from the Goosebumps series, sadly, but from a very different kind of book, a book of Korean fairy tales and folk tales written in English that I treasured as a child. So I think we have a visual here from that book that I'm going to show you. Yeah. So, pretty creepy. Hopefully you can see the main crux of this image, which is the expression on this girl's face. Yeah, she haunted my nightmares for years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you're looking at here and the context for this image. So this comes from a story called The Fox Girl. It's translated to The Fox Girl, and it's about an archetype called the kumiho. So for those who might be familiar, the kumiho is the nine-tailed fox spirit. There's different iterations of her that pop up through a lot of Southeast Asian folklore, but the kumiho is the Korean version, and she's the one I grew up with. So the kumiho, just to tell you a bit about the archetype itself before I go into what this story is about, she's like a nine-tailed fox spirit who often takes the form of a beautiful young girl or woman. And it's interesting because across these different iterations of the kumiho, there's, for example, in Japan, the kitsune, they're portrayed sort of differently. So the kitsune is often seen as kind of mischievous or like a trickster figure, not the kumiho. I mean, look at her. This is not a woman who's up to mischief. She means business. Pure evil. But the thing that really fascinates me about the kumiho is that she's this very hybrid creature, right? So she can transform into a beautiful woman. She's often seducing young men, tearing apart families, eating livestock. It's this whole thing. So, yeah, she's got a lot on her plate. So the story that this character comes from is about a young boy who he's part of a regular family, and then one day the horses that his family owns keep turning up dead. And so his father tells him, hey, can you like go stand watch and figure out who it is or what it is that's attacking our horses? So he agrees because he's a good son. He goes and stands by the stables, and then in the middle of the night, who does he see creeping around the corner looking like this but his own beloved younger sister? And he watches in horror as she proceeds to tear into these horses. I'm not going to go into detail because I know some of you are eating, but it's gross. It's very gross how she like kills these horses and eats them. So the next morning, horrified, he tells his parents what he saw, and they don't believe him. They're like, how could you say such things about your sister? And so he goes to a monk to seek spiritual advice, and the monk tells him, hey, I think your sister has been possessed by this fox spirit. And he gives him these magic potions that he can use to defeat her. He goes back home, realizes that his parents are gone. His sister is like, they've gone away. Isn't that weird? The rest of the story, I'll kind of speed through it. You know, fox girl attacks boy, boy runs away, boy uses magic potions to defeat her, and then she dies. And when she dies, her human form ebbs away, leaving nothing but a fox with 9 tails, proving that the monk and the boy's hunches were right all along. So in terms of scary stories, this has, I think, a lot of elements that make it memorable. There's folk magic, there's body horror, there's supernatural stuff. I think the most chilling thing of all is the fact that there's this malevolent force taking the form of a beloved family member. But the thing that bothered me the most, I think, both as a kid and now in this story, is the fact that she was so easily defeated. You know, she's so evil and so powerful, and yet all it took was this little boy and some potions to destroy her. And the older I got and the more I learned about fairy tales, the nature of folk tales and what they're designed to teach us, the more I began to actually feel kind of sorry for her. I mean, she is an evil being who goes around preying on the weak and vulnerable and ripping out their insides, but she's also just a girl. I don't know, like, she's a very uniquely singular and feminized force, and I think that's why I kind of started to wonder a little bit more about her and what it would be like to be her. And so as a writer, when I started writing stories of my own, many of which were influenced by Korean folklore, I began wondering about the kumiho figure. And I started to write a story about a kumiho that was actually like really bad at doing things that kumiho are supposed to do. She's afraid of everything. She has all these powers, but she doesn't know how to use them. And it occurred to me that the thing that she was most afraid of, because this kumiho also has fears, was loneliness, and fear of being abandoned was a huge thing for this character. And I think for me it came down to the fact that this is such a hybridized creature. She's not really a human, she's not really an animal, she's kind of supernatural but also very rooted in the body. And so this was a creature that I found myself wondering about and coming back to again and again. And so as I worked on this story, I realized I didn't have an ending, and I worked on it and thought about it for years. And I kept wondering, how would I end this story? Would she stay true to her true nature as a kumiho? Would she choose something else? And then I began thinking about the nature of fear. And so I'm going to get a little psychoanalytical on you all and say, what if the thing that we're most afraid of is actually the thing that we desire most? So thinking about this character that I had written based on this legend, I thought, well, what if what she fears the most, which is being abandoned and being alone, actually, what if that's the thing she actually needs to run toward in order to figure out what's next for this creature? And so the more that I thought about it, the more I realized that the reason this image still speaks to me, and I'm still terrified. I can't even really like turn fully to look at it because I'm too scared. The reason it scares me is because it makes me think about loss of control, something I think a lot of us in this room probably fear, and also what it means to be attacked by something or someone that you've deemed to be safe. You know, we live in a world where none of us can guarantee our safety or the safety of the ones we love. We live in dark, scary, and uncertain times, so it's no wonder that we turn to things like ghosts and ghouls or fox demons to sort of therapize ourselves. But, you know, in thinking about the kumiho and what she's taught me, I've come to the conclusion that ultimately the thing that we need to do with fear is to not, in order to really deal with it, is not to run away from it, but to run towards it. And no matter what shape that fear might take, whether it's something strange or familiar to us, it's up to us to determine what is about this fear that's so specific to us and why it's appeared to us in the first place. And I'll close with just a little bit of writing/life advice from a writing mentor of mine. A writing teacher of mine used to say that the antidote to fear is curiosity. And she would say, don't get scared, get curious, which is something that I think about a lot. And I think it's very relevant for a lot of things we're living through at this moment. And what does it mean to be curious? Curiosity demands that we move closer to the thing that we might not understand or be afraid of. It asks us to ask questions, to look closely, and to try and understand, and to move forward anyway, even if the thing that we're scared of looks like that. So, thank you.
Let's hear it one more time, because that was amazing. Woo, Gina Chung, woo! So just to recap, I think what we've heard so far is that, in this country, in the US, some of the deepest and greatest fears that you see in horror movies are really about teenagers having sex. And if you're having really good make-out sex, you will definitely get your head chopped off. And then Gina was talking about some of the fears that are in the Far East, and it has to do with your family members, the ones that you trust the most, who will be possessed and end up chopping your head off. And that made me think about, the English. What are their greatest fears? What really frightens them, or should I say us? I wouldn't know, but them. And I realized, what it is actually, the greatest fear? It's complaining in public. It's that thing, if you've ever noticed, the real horror that grips a Brit when they call over, say, a waiter, and they say, "Ooh, waiter, I'm so sorry. I didn't really mean it, but there's a fly in my soup. I mean, I'm sure it's not your fault." And you think, for God's sake, just send it back. It's not that scary. So then I realized it's also what women do. Women are often always apologizing. They're often very afraid. In fact, about 10 years ago, there was a very famous poll in this country that asked women what were they most afraid of. And, number one, of course, was, a beloved family member dying. Number two was speaking in public. Number two. It was actually worse than death. Dying was like 4 or 5. But speaking in public was a fate worse than death. And that is why I am so proud to be able to introduce our final speaker tonight. Because Clara Bingham is that woman who is not afraid to speak in public. I know, I know, exactly. Woo! She is an award-winning correspondent and journalist. She's written for Newsweek, of course, Vanity Fair, The Guardian, and The Daily Beast. And she is the author of 3 books. So the first was Witness to the Revolution, then Women on the Hill, and now most recently, The Movement, How Women's Liberation Transformed America, 1963 to 1973. Yes, those pivotal years. I know. And this book has been sweeping the country. It is a very necessary conversation. It is a public conversation. And let us all tonight welcome Clara Bingham to the stage. Woo!
Amanda got one thing wrong, which is I am terrified of speaking in public. So. The story I'm going to tell you tonight is about a different kind of fear. It's really about personal bravery. So it isn't as scary as some of the other stories you've been hearing. It starts with Mother's Day, 2010, when my mother told me that she had had an abortion. I think Mother's Day is a perfectly good day to do that. We were having lunch with my 3 very young children who were ages 9, 13, and 14. And for some reason, I chose this mother's lunch to explain abortion to them. Not really sure why. I've been really trying. I asked all of them if they remembered. Of course, they didn't, but they did remember this lunch. So I was explaining this is a very important thing for women, for their freedom, for their humanity. And then all of a sudden, Jonesy, which is what I called my mother in public at least, piped up and said, "I had an abortion." And we were all a little stunned. It was kind of a TMI moment. And I said, "Well, when? Was this illegal? Was it before Roe v. Wade in 1973? And she said yes, and I went to London. And I realized, well, of course, that's what women of privilege who had enough money to have a safe doctor give them an abortion before 73 would do. It was better than going to Mexico or a dangerous back alley. And then we never talked about it again. It was sort of a weird taboo subject. And I think she had me on the defensive, and I didn't really know what to do about it. So I filed this away back in 2010 and forgot about it. Fast forward to 2.5 months ago, I published a book, which Amanda told you about, it's an oral history of the women's liberation movement. And it takes place between 1963 and 73. And I interviewed about 120 women who were between ages 75 and 95. And I interviewed the founders of Our Bodies Ourselves and the original 9 tennis players who, with Billie Jean King, did their own thing. The first woman to run the Boston Marathon illegally in 1966. I interviewed feminist lawyers, members of Red Stockings and Witch, women from all over the country, and I asked every single one of them, did you have an abortion? And surprisingly, most of them had had multiple abortions. And I made sure to pry as much as I could to find out where was it, who provided it, how much did it cost, what was your experience like? And they were, of course, harrowing stories. Frances Beale had a young, man who probably wasn't a doctor give her an abortion on a kitchen table. She was 17, almost bled out, got to Harlem Hospital in time to have her life saved. Faye Waddleton was in Harlem Hospital watching women die in the ward that they had specifically for women with botched abortions. And there were so many more that I don't need to tell you all the details about. But they were grueling and awful, and everyone was taking their lives into their hands. But 1 million women a year were having illegal abortions, and about 1,000 of them were dying every year. And it was a healthcare crisis because the sexual revolution was revving on in the 60s, but birth control was very hard to come by. It was not legal for single women nationally until 1972. So everyone had to slip on wedding rings, pretend they were married, and con their doctors into giving them birth control. And a lot of people didn't get around to doing that. My mother was born the year after Gloria Steinem. She was born in 1935, and which put her kind of smack in the middle of the group of women who I was interrogating. And but she was not a movement feminist. She was not a member of NOW or NARAL. She never protested. She didn't really think that sisterhood was powerful. And in fact, the second wave feminists would probably call her a man junkie. It was a description they had for boy crazy men. Jonesy loved men, and men loved Jonesy. I remember she reinvented herself by 1968. She was widowed. My father died when I was only 3, and she was a then very traditional 50s housewife living in the suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky, and realized she had to leave and moved me and my brother up to New York to the Upper West Side, where she hit the late 60s. And I remember watching her get dressed to go out at night. She would wear white patent leather, knee-high go-go boots and very short hot pants. And then she would tease her hair for a long time into a beautiful big beehive and go out on the town. My grandmother, her mother, would always say to me, your mother's a male magnet. But all of that magnetic energy wasn't always the greatest thing for me growing up. When I was in college, with that stage, we'd moved to Washington. I came home on vacation to get my wisdom teeth taken out, all 4 of them impacted, horrible. We're leaving the dentist office, and I'm woozy, and all of a sudden, Jonesy runs into David Blundy, very dashing English foreign correspondent, who she suddenly starts flirting with. And they're walking down K Street, and we're passing our car, which is down at the thing. And all of a sudden, David says, well, would you like a ride? And she said, sure, that would be great. And I was like, what? What is going on? And all of a sudden, I found myself climbing into his VW bug that had newspapers all the way up to the seat and clutching my knees. And he took us home. I promptly went upstairs and threw up. And she was like, see you later. I got to go get our car. So that was a typical thing. By the time I was a senior in college and starting to take myself seriously, she was dating the humorist and writer Christopher Buckley, who it was one of the great loves of her life, and he was 17 years younger than she was. It was such a triumph. He was only 10 years older than I was. So this meant that I was a major liability. It was Thanksgiving vacation, so I had to come home, and she instructed me, go directly to your room. Do not talk to anybody at the party. They were having a Brideshead Revisited costume party. It was 1983 when Brideshead was sort of the great show on PBS. And she said, but if you run into anybody and they talk to you, tell them you're a freshman, not a senior. So I ended up running to my room, and I was very obedient and decided not to blow her cover, and didn't meet anybody. So that continued to happen. When I got married, she was very upset that I gave my real age to the New York Times. She started crying on the wedding day. With my friends, my girlfriends, she would always insist on sitting next to their husbands. It would be like, here's your seat next to Mary Beth. No, can I sit next to Chris? It was just so blatant and obvious. And therefore, I had a lot of trouble as a young feminist respecting this attitude that she had. She died in October of 2020. I had started working on the book a year before, and because it wasn't really her topic, we didn't talk about it a lot. At that stage, she'd found her career and was a book editor, which she'd done for 30 years. But even so, we didn't really talk much about my book before she died. And then about 2 years later, I was writing a chapter very late February about Ms. Magazine, and the first issue that came out, which was January of 1972. And inside the centerfold of that issue was a huge banner headline that said, "We have had abortions." And I knew that Billie Jean King had lent her name to this list, and she was getting a lot of bad press. All of her press conferences, she was the #1 tennis player at the time for women. And at every press conference, she was dogged, and people would accuse her of having an abortion just to make more money on the circuit, and it was horrible for her. And so I thought I should print this out and see who else is on this list. But before I did that, I read I call this the Be Not Afraid list. This was the manifesto that came before the 53 names. To save lives and to spare other women the pain of socially imposed guilt, 53 respected women residents of the United States have volunteered to begin the Women's American Women's Petition. Because of the social stigma still wrongly attached to abortion, many women in public life or with husbands in public life had felt unable to join us. We are mostly women active in community work or in the arts, but we invite all women from every walk of life to help eliminate this stigma and call for the repeal of archaic and inhumane abortion laws. By joining us in this petition, the complete list will be sent to the White House and to every state legislature. By the next edition, 1,425 women had added their names to this important petition that is kind of iconic and now taught in a lot of women's gender studies classes. So I printed out the PDF and started reading the names. They were alphabetical. First name, Eve Auchincloss, Sunny Aurelio, Lorraine Beebe, and then Joan Bingham. My mother was on this list. And I screamed, fell off my chair. My poor husband, who was in the office next door, thought something awful had happened. And I was just so amazed that she had done this. And it was as if she'd crawled out of her grave with her hand and shook me by the collar and said, you know what? You have been selling me short, kid. And I actually am a feminist too, but we come in all sizes and shapes. And I realized that I had not seen her really fully for who she really was as the class. And I had interviewed 120 women, asked them all about their abortions, but hadn't even asked my mother. So I thought the only way to honor her would be to dedicate the book to her. So I did.
All right. I think let's all give us a round of applause for not being afraid. Be not afraid to be yourselves, to speak in public, to be true. So, thank you very much. But before I thank you even more and thank our writers who've been talking on stage, there's a very important thing, of course, which is to celebrate the really clever ones in the audience. Not that it's a competition, nevertheless it is. And we have several winners this evening, rather exciting. And Lucas, because we have several winners, is going to choose the actual winner. And then he's going to reveal what the authors were, what the titles were, and who the authors were. And those of you who did not cheat, more fooled you. No, congratulations. That was very good and very honest. All right, Lucas, off you go.
Congratulations to Rebecca Todd. Please, you can collect your book bag as you exit. And the answers are The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by Frank Baum, Freedom by Beyonce herself, and Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It was a great show. Big round of applause for all of our amazing speakers. Everyone will be signing their books as you exit. Please buy a book, support their work, have them sign the book. And we'll be back here on this stage November 12th with an amazing show we're putting on with the Whiting Foundation. We have Michael Cunningham coming, Atasa Abramian, and Catherine Barnett. So November 12th, we'll see you all back here. Thank you all. Be not afraid as you go out. Thank you.